First things first, guys. How are you?
We're good.
We're good.
Yeah, really good.
That's good to hear. So I read, I think it was a bio or something, but you wrote, beginning an album is always a time of many unknowns and seemingly endless possibilities. So where do you start with a record?
Well, it always, the records, we always start a record when we feel we have enough songs for an album. Mm-hmm. Going into this album, we had, I think, we had more songs that we felt were album worthy than we did on the previous couple records. Mm-hmm. But there is a period of discovery in making the record where sometimes the songs you thought were going to work don't work. Sometimes songs surprise you that you kind of had lower on the list, and then something happens in the studio and they kind of take on a life of their own. So, more times than not, the songs you think are going to work tend to work. Okay. But it's always exciting to see which songs kind of poke their heads up and become they kind of blossom in the studio, whereas in the demo form there was something missing. Yeah.
You say there were this time around more album-worthy songs. So do you know why? How come?
Well, I feel that when Chris left the band, I realized how much I would lean on him to kind of finish some of the songs, and he's a brilliant guy, and the reason a lot of the records he worked on sound the way they do is because of the skill set that he brought. And so for me, as the songwriter, I wanted to make sure that I was doing more work than I had done before, because I recognized that this was going to be a really pivotal album for us. This was going to be an album that was in some ways going to determine what the future of the band was going to be. Not only because we have two new members, but because the dynamic has shifted in the group. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing that I was really vigilant in the work that I was doing on the front end, so that when we got into the studio, we weren't relying on, Nick will finish this, or Dave or Zach will have an idea, this will get done.
Yeah.
So, and I feel in some ways I did almost too much work on the songs, because in some ways I didn't leave a lot of room for these guys to
But no, I mean, you did, but we also did a lot of pre-production. We did more pre-production for this record than we'd had in our previous two albums. Normally in the past, we would take these long breaks, and the next time we would really get into making a record was when we were right at the start in the studio process. And we did two separate sessions before we started for real, just on our own. Zach had a studio for a while in Los Angeles that we spent some time in. We did another week or so in Seattle, and we were able to on the songs that weren't quite finished all the way, we were able to kind of think about them. And actually, to speak to Ben's sort of first point, it was nice to go through a lot of the songs that we were, again, thinking this is going to be on the record. We would go through the pre-production phase only to find out at the end of it, we're like, well, maybe not, and that helped us kind of get some sense of dimension from this really prolific pile of songs that Ben had turned in. I mean, there was more, like he said, there's more material for us to go through at the beginning of this album than pretty much any other album that we've done. So I think that was really necessary. I think we all recognized kind of early on that it's going to be important to really do the work before we actually start making the record. And even then, once you get into making the record, there's still an infinite amount of things that happen. So
because volume doesn't equate to quality all the time. Having say that I could say I wrote 100 songs for this record, but there's only 10 songs on the record for a reason.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But this planning more than you ever did before, and kind of the writing 100 songs, was that a reaction at like you say, on the changing dynamics and this being a pivotal moment? Was it kind of a thought of, okay, we have to definitely make sure we're going to bring out the best album we can?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every album that we've made, we're making the best record we can with what we have in front of us at the time. Mm-hmm. But I think that in the past there was maybe a slightly kind of arrogant, assumption that look, if this record isn't the best record we ever make, we'll still make more records. And the four of us, we've done this before. You know, not everyone's going to be the best record. You know, but you know, having a career as long as we've had, you know, there are highs and lows. It's just
Right.
you know, any artist who's been doing it as long as we have, that's how it goes. But I think that I think we all realized that this record was this is a pivotal moment for us. This record was going to determine whether or not this band had a future or not. Because, you know, we had been playing with Dave and Zach for 2 years, 3 years before we went, 3 years when we were in the studio with them. And, you know, we enjoyed their company very much. They're amazing players. We were really excited about going in the studio with them. But there was a little part of me, you know, and I don't see, this isn't a slight to their abilities. There was a little part of me that was like, man, I really hope this works.
Same.
Because it is so different.
Yeah.
Hanging out in Amsterdam, you know, going to dinner and playing shows and, you know, joking backstage, that is a whole nother animal from being in a studio and telling somebody that their idea isn't good.
Yeah.
You know, or telling, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
somebody telling me like that lyric's not good,
Yeah.
you know, and so I was confident, but there was a part of me that was a little nervous. And I don't see how anyone could go into this arrangement without feeling a little bit of self-doubt, you know.
Was there a turning point then, where the confidence kind of came and you thought, oh, okay, this is going to work now, I can see it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think within the first week, I give a lot of the credit of that feeling for me to Rich Costey, our producer, because he made Kintsugi with us. He understood where we were at as a four-piece then, and now with, you know, new additions of Zach and Dave, I feel like he was in a kind of a unique position objectively to weigh out, you know, what was happening with this band and this transition and whether, and kind of, I sort of trusted him in those moments when we were like, how's this working out, to say, this is right on the money, you guys sound great.
Which is part of the reason we wanted to work with him again, was like, he's
exactly.
the constant.
Yeah.
He will be able to tell the three
Exactly.
of us, Nick and Jason and I,
Yeah.
dude, it's not working.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and he has that objectivity that we wouldn't have.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, because when we were just enthusiastic, as you would be, just optimistic, like this is going to be great. You know, trying to keep the spirits high and morale high. But you know, I did look to him at a lot of points in the beginning to see like, is this really going to happen? And you know, we had a lot of side conversations with him along the way. And again, I give a lot of credit to him, kind of to sort of shepherd us through this and kind of reassure us in those times when we were doubting ourselves, encourage us, you know, when we weren't sure about what direction to go, and allow us to kind of push back. And in some ways, it was far more of a dynamic recording situation than it was making Kintsugi. We were, I mean, obviously, a lot of the kind of, you know, I don't know, it wasn't like there was a dramatic thing happening with Chris, but a lot of that had cleared away. And, you know, just in the new studio that Rich had opened, the way in which we tracked was, you know, there were 5 of us kind of in one small room. There was, you know, there wasn't really a lot of place for us to go and escape and kind of detach from the process. And, you know, I think we kind of teased ourselves, you know, along the way. We thought, oh, you know, when it's not my turn to be recording, I'll go do something else in town. But pretty quickly you realize, like, I just wanted to be in this room with these people while these decisions were being made. And that, to me, felt, there was so much more of a dialogue happening.
Yeah,
amongst the
not out
5.
of distrust, but just
Yeah.
out of ownership over the process.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
I just want to be here because I want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to like leave and come back and have there be like 17 guitar parts and be like, oh,
Yeah.
like I wasn't here for this. Like I want to be present
Yeah,
for it because
yeah.
it's exciting.
Yeah,
You know?
and that's a little bit different for us than it was in the last couple albums, for sure.
Yeah, in that sense, did you discover something maybe about yourselves or about what the band is going through this process?
You know, this record was the most enjoyable and inspiring record for us to make since Transatlanticism.
Yes.
And when we were making the record, we would say a version of that to each other when we were walking home from the studio. And we were always really quick to kind of make sure we recognized that just because we're having fun doesn't make it good.
Yeah.
You know? Like just because you're having fun at something doesn't mean what you're doing is good.
Yeah.
So we still need to be we need to keep our eyes on it and be brutally kind of honest with what's working, what's not working. But that being said, you know, having made 9 albums with this band, you know, I've made other albums in other places, and it's like the records that are the most enjoyable to make, the most inspiring records to make, tend to be the records that are the better albums. You know, there are, you know, there isn't, as I look through our catalog, there isn't a record that people love that we hated making.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, you know, time will tell if this record confirms or is the first outlier in that that position. But you know, I don't know. I just feel that, you know, there was a special kind of, it was an enjoyable record to make, and I wouldn't go so far as to say you can hear that in the music, but it definitely the record feels more complete and more inspired to me than maybe some of the other albums we've made.